Hey, my name is Krystin Glass, and today we'll be presenting on family violence in rural communities. So first, I want to start off with some definitions. So the definition of rural is of or relating to the country, people, or life, or agriculture. Family violence is defined as any threatening, coercive, dominating, or abusive behavior between people in a family, domestic or intimate relationship, or former intimate relationship that causes the person experiencing the behavior to feel fear. Domestic violence, a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, or technological actions or threats of actions. And IPV, which you may is a term you may see a lot in this presentation, refers to intimate partner violence. So systems theory. First general systems theory was created by Ludwig von Bertalanffy between the 1940s and 1950s. Family systems theories, which will also be brought up in this presentation, was created by Dr. Murray Bowen and was first published in 1966. Systems theory is defined as an interdisciplinary study of systems as they relate to one another within a larger, more complex system. Some commonly used terms within systems theory would be system, an entity that's made up of interrelated independent parts. Complex system, the greater whole system made up of individual smaller systems, and ecological systems, the various systems in an individual's life that influence their behavior. Family systems theory was created by Dr. Murray Brown. This theory and its 8 concepts, by formulating the theory using systems thinking to integrate knowledge of humans as a product of evolution with knowledge from family research. Family systems theory insists that there are clear hierarchies and boundaries that portray how individuals and subsystems relate within the family systems, which is why family systems theory is actually heavily criticized when used in most cases of family and domestic violence. Continuing on with family systems theory. Family systems theory promotes that individuals within families are intricately connected to one another. With that being said, if anything happens to one family member, it will affect everyone in the family. Um, this is something that I just pulled from my research that kind of touches on why it's heavily criticized when being used for family therapy or dealing with domestic violence or family violence. The feminist critique of family systems theory highlights several important considerations, including the importance of power dynamics within families and repercussions of taking a non-blaming neutral stance towards violent behavior, which is basically just going to say that professionals really shouldn't use family systems theory when dealing with domestic violence or family violence because it takes such a non-blaming neutral stance in those situations. In those situations, you have to have a person responsible for harm to the family. Family system holds that individuals within families are intricately connected to one another and that the experiences in one part of the system affect all other parts of the system as well. Family systems theory has recently been heavily criticized as an intervention for family domestic violence. Family system theory focuses on examining the function that a behavior plays within a system rather than labeling behaviors as good as bad, which, like I said before, is not good when you're dealing with domestic violence and family violence because those actions do have to be labeled as good or bad. It is important to remember that the family is a subsystem within larger systems such as community, which interact with one another and contribute to the maintenance of particular patterns of behavior. So the family system is a subsystem within a greater system, including the rural community, which we'll get into now. So the rate of domestic violence is greater amongst the rural population. Victims of domestic violence in rural settings also differentiate from victims in urban settings in that they experience worse psychological and physical health outcomes. Rural values can also play a part in domestic violence or family violence, which goes back to the systems and how the family is a subsystem to the greater community. So most rural communities hold values such as religion, which pushes the permanence of marriage, the importance of privacy, increased likelihood of victims knowing those service workers, which um, which makes them hesitate to reach out for help due to fear of the leak of confidentiality. Current domestic and family abuse victims in rural areas are afraid to seek help from current resources in their areas. Other limitations for rural settings and victims of domestic violence or family violence would be the geographic distance and isolation, the lack of transportation, and limited access to appropriate resources. Rural areas have a higher percentage of firearm presence within the household. Firearms within rural communities are often viewed as culturally acceptable and a means for carrying out community practices such as hunting protection. Culture, traditions, and historical experiences are important elements in how individuals groups frame, make sense of, and respond to prevention, intervention, and service efforts that target domestic violence. So basically what this is saying is that those values, those key values, beliefs, and other thoughts that come from living in rural spaces um, affect the way that the family as a subsystem thinks and reacts to domestic and family violence. Okay. The Office of Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice, funds projects that implement, expand, and establish cooperative efforts among law enforcement officers, prosecutors, victim service providers, and other related parties to investigate and prosecute incidents of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. And it also provides treatment, advocacy, counseling, and legal advice. It was created in 1995. The Family First Prevention and Services Act was authorized in 1984 and administered by the U.S. Department of Health and Food Services and is the only federal funding source dedicated to domestic violence shelters and programs. It supports life-saving services for victims of domestic violence and their children, and is the only federal funding source for domestic violence shelters and programs. Programs and acts such as these are important, especially with dealing with victims in rural communities who are afraid to go to the resources that are there. If we could find a way to kind of give them better transportation to outside resources, these would be very good options. This is just a quote that I really liked. The effects of abuse are devastating and far-reaching. Domestic violence speaks many languages, has many colors, and lives in many different communities. These are my references.